Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Natter with Neve. And today I have the delightful Chrissy Kelly with me. Chrissy is a poet and she also runs well-being retreats in Morocco, where she is currently based. Welcome, Chrissy.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. And you're based in Morocco.
Yeah, I just been out here for a year. I came for a 2-week holiday and I basically sort of extended. I come back to England sometimes to work, but now I'm doing like obviously on some online stuff, but setting up, yeah, a well-being retreat in Morocco, and we've got our first one in May. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
it's
It's
really
quite a big move to make. Quite
Well, I was like, I've been coming out to Marrakesh for like on and off for like 15 years because I was married to a Moroccan man. We're not together anymore, but we're still really good friends. So, I've got an affinity with Morocco. And
ah,
Essaouira is a beautiful place, very relaxed, very chilled, lots of expats. So, yeah, it's fantastic.
I mean that does make sense. Obviously, if you've got an affinity
Yeah,
and you've got connections to the
yeah,
place, it's not
yeah,
as
yeah,
if you just
yeah.
kind of upped and moved like without any kind of. I can't imagine sort of going on a 2 week holiday and then deciding you want to live there. So obviously,
Oh,
yeah.
I did do that when I was 19, when I went to Greece on holiday and lived there for 2 years.
Okay, wow. So you're quite the adventurer then.
Yeah, I love an adventure. Yeah.
So, um, we've I've mentioned at the beginning that you're a poet. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So I grew up in the foster care system in the UK. I was in foster care for like 13 years, from 3 until 16. Um,
Okay, wow.
and I loved reading. Like reading was my kind of escapism.
Mm.
Um, I would be the kid in the class with the book underneath when they were supposed to be studying science or maths. I'd be reading, and all of those stories and those things around used to help me to escape from the life that I was living. And it was a real way for me to transport myself. The stories used to transport me into another world, like so. That's why. And then it really came a bit later. All my poetry I used to write was very private. I would just write it on my own. I didn't really read it out to anyone. I had a very I if anybody wanted to look at it or read it, I used to get a lot of anxiety, like feel very nervous. My heart would palpitate and stuff.
Mm.
And then over the years, it took a long, long time. Uh, I started sharing it um, with some friends, and then open mic night, and then I went on a 2-year course with a writer who led it, and we used to take our work and read it out. Um, and through that, all of my poetry is very much lived experience, story based experience around some of the things that we went through. Not necessarily like horror stories, but to give hope and show that there's possibility, and how a story is a connection. So you can listen to a poem and feel connected. So it's very interesting for me because some of the things I thought people would connect with, maybe they didn't, and they'd connect with something different. And now I do commissions for my friend who's she writes around trauma and recovery, and
Yeah.
she's got a book coming out that's all about connection, actually, stories. So, you know, ways that stories help us to heal. So you could hear something in my story if you were a young person in care that may resonate, and you might think, oh, okay, there's these things are
Mm.
possible for me to change how I've lived. And I find that what happens is stories are a way of connecting. So whenever I do my own like workshops, the way that we connect in the beginning is we tell a story. So I
Mm.
would always share my story about what I don't go into really deep horror details because I don't know who's in the room and I don't want to set up a situation where I've triggered somebody to feel a certain
Mm.
way. But I will share my story to the degree that it's appropriate, and then from a place of strength, love, and hope to help people to, you know, come on their own journey with me with that. So my journey is expressed through poetry. My journey is expressed through, how someone might identify with me because we never know who's in the room. But I
Yeah.
knew somebody for like 15 years and I didn't know that they'd been brought up in care because they never shared it. It was only when I shared that part of my growing up and my story that they came to me and shared it. And so you just really never know. You never know who's in the room, you never know the impact of your story. Um, and I love listening to people's stories. Like, I love hearing where they've come from. Like, I think we mentioned, like, Benjamin Zephaniah, poet that I admire. His story, I think I'm correct in saying his poems are written in a particular dialect. He grew up
Mm.
in a certain time in England where and just like racism and seeing, the story of
Mm.
overcoming that. It's something that's very inspiring, and just hearing everyone's got a wonderful story. Like no matter if I think life, we can look at someone else and think, oh, they've had it. All of us have got our story. And one of the big
Yeah.
things for me when I learned when I came into doing the three principles work was to let go of my story a little bit, to realize that my story didn't define me. I was very attached to life is more difficult for me because I don't have any parents. I don't, I've had a tough
Mm.
life, I've come from a difficult beginning. But actually, to let go of that part of my story was very liberating. And it also with young people, it shows them they can let go of your story. You don't have to hold on to your story if you don't want to. You can step into every
Yeah.
day, you can step into something new.
When you say let go of your story, can you tell me a little bit more about that? What exactly does that mean, letting go of our story?
Well, I think, like for me, letting go of my story was that I was a young kid that had come out of the care system. I'd had a really difficult life. Nobody really understood what that was like. So it was like having almost carrying that, you could say, carrying that baggage with you. And actually, if you put it down, there's ways you could look at it. You can
Mm.
fully embrace your story and use it in a way that's going to provide, strength and hope, or you can put it down and you don't need it anymore. So for me, letting go was just like, how useful is this story for me now? It's useful to share it in a positive
Yeah.
way, but it's not useful for me to hold on to the torment and the suffering because it's just not useful. So it it I'm not saying it was easy and I'm not saying it happened
Mm.
quickly. It took a long time. It wasn't like I one day, but it was almost like it took a long time, but it happened in an instant. And
Yeah.
I started to see that, suffering was a place to visit, not to reside. And how useful is that story to me as a 50-year-old woman carrying around that story? Doesn't mean that I don't I don't go into it sometimes because I just love to share something with you. When you're brought up in the care system, your story is written by other people. They write your story. So every time they come to visit you, they write something about you. So they go back to their desk and they write notes and this and that and the other. Well, about 2 years ago, we were given access to our what they call records, which is your story of you being in care. And
Yeah.
that's a tough that could be a tough thing to read because you're reading your story based upon somebody else's view of you. So it's a fascinating thing. So I have my story, from when I was 3 until when I was 16, all mixed up with my two brothers' stories as well, because at that time they would put your story all together.
Yeah.
So so it's kind of fascinating to me to read other people's opinions or other people's story of me as a young person, and different ways that that was interpreted compared to my own story. And that goes, so it's very unique story writing, because a lot of the time if you're living at home with your parent and carer, they're not going to be writing notes about you like, oh, so and so was, unless they keep journals, but it's not going to be
Yeah.
specifically like that. There might be a visual story. So we had the opportunity after 30 years to get our story and also to get a visual story. So that's actually quite huge, and that in a way it's kind of a bit of a privilege, because I've spoken to some friends about it, and they say, oh, I don't even have a baby. I don't even have any photos from my childhood. And that storytelling is is a way to reclaim what happened to us as children. You know, there's a power in it.
Yeah.
It can be difficult to read some of the stories and read what some people have written about you, or you could identify with it. Like I was always written about as being very strong-willed, and I giggle because I think, yes, it's true. They saw it. You know, there's some things that.
Yeah. That's probably how you survived, actually. You
Yeah,
came out of
yeah,
it as, as
yeah,
well as you did and being able to help other people. Like,
yeah,
I mean, as you said, in families, like I don't have a written kind of history of my story, but I do have the stories that my parents told and then my siblings told. But it's funny because even when I get together with my siblings and they have completely different memories of an event than I will have. And it's funny because, I will remember an event as, really bad or traumatic, and they'll, no, it wasn't like that. It's only actually, we all have our own experiences, don't we? So that must be,
yeah.
I can't imagine what my story, well, I mean, if I look back at some of my school reports and what the things they said about me, I can imagine
That's
some
the
of what
nearest.
people
Yeah,
might say. But if I'd taken that on board, I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am today because yeah. All my school reports were Neve could
I mean,
do better,
I
Neve
mean,
could do better.
like, what, I mean, some of it is. I mean, you have to have a bit of a sense of humor, but some of it you could be like, oh my goodness. I mean, it was like things like Christine would do well if she stopped being distracting the boys. And me and my brother were like rolling up laughing. It was like, oh my God, like who would write that about a young child, or about, and we would just,
Mm.
but the stories are what connect us and heal us, and give us that opportunity to, even though I talked about letting the story go, obviously I'm carrying it. I'm carrying it in my heart, in my essence, in my cells, because the bits that I'm letting go of are the bits that are no longer serving me. That's the bits
Yeah,
I'm letting go of. I don't need to be, it's not that I'm going to let go of my whole story. I'm just still, sharing it and using it in ways where it's going to benefit other people, really. Um, but it's a fascinating idea of, looking back. Like, I mean, I did just recently when I was back in England, I did a massive clear out, and I've got probably 50 notebooks full of poems and bits and pieces, and it was interesting to look back and think, oh, some of the stories in here are very different, but some of the stories about how I feel and about what I'm writing about and my affirmations, and I've been saying the same thing for 10 years. So it shows you, like, sometimes our stories remain the same and we go round and round in them. They're not they're
yeah,
not they're not all negative, you know. So I find that, yeah, it's exciting, and that concept of your story isn't a negative thing all the time. It's a very positive thing, and I can
yeah,
really pray, wow, look at my story. I had nobody telling me what to do ever. That's why I'm free spirited, because nobody told me what to do. When I was 16, I was at a place where it was like, well, what do I do now? I have to go off and live out in the world. I have to discover things. I've got to find my own way in the world. And even though somebody could be looking in at that and thinking, God, that's awful. Like when I wouldn't want to
Mm.
be sending someone out into the world on their own. Or we can look at it and think, wow, look at that. Look at she can go off and be free and even at this point in my life, we could say, oh, oh, I haven't had any parents. Or I can look at it and think, well, now's my turn to step into my work because I don't have to care for anyone. So
Yeah,
I can almost reframe everything in my story. I can look at it like, wow, look at my freedom, look at where I'm at now. Obviously there's going to be times when I'm going to feel lost for not having that traditional parent relationship, and looking at the story of what happened to my mother. What would have happened, what was her story, what happened to her that she would not be able to look after three children and then be in care and her disappear and my father not coming to get her. It's like there's huge stories there, but how much of my present life do I want to spend looking at that story? So that's a
yeah,
big thing for me. That's a huge thing for me, right? How much of my time now am I going to spend looking at that story? So what happens a lot of the time with people that have been brought up in the care system, they'll get their notes from the UK care system and they'll actually read them and burn them.
you're frozen.
Moment, I've read a lot of mine.
Mm.
Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, you said
Oh,
people in the care system will get their notes and they'll burn
all
them.
right. So people in the care system get their notes, and often what they'll do is they'll read them and then they'll have a burning ceremony to get rid of them because really that's someone else's opinion of who you are. That
And we
story.
don't need that, do we?
Yeah. So for now, I'm in that place of my story. I'm still debating what to do with them. Have you heard of Lem Sisse? He got his notes from the care system and he put them next to poetry, and then he did a piece of performance around it. So he actually opened his notes live on stage and read them out with a psychologist. So I mean, how brave was that as a
That is
story?
very brave. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. So I obviously
Mm.
I didn't do that, but I'm looking at, okay, how could my story be used to support? So one of the ways that I've thought about is if now there's like a thing called record keeping, so they still have to keep records, but
Mm.
they have social workers and people writing records about people are being taught that remember, someday someone's going to read what you've written. That person has the right to see that information about themselves. So how can you write it in a way thinking that somebody's going to come and read their story later?
Mm.
So that is a piece of work that's being done, which is really important because it can be hard to read difficult things about your own story.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard even, if, looking at a school report, and reading difficult
Yeah,
things about yourself. And that's kind of where we have to kind of detach because we know our own truth, don't we?
yeah, of
And we
course.
know who we are. And,
Yeah,
what's that saying? What other people's opinion is no business of mine.
yeah, exactly,
Um,
exactly. And it's a huge like I you know we can make up stories. We can things that like you were saying earlier, like we all have a different reality, like a separate reality. We'll
yeah,
be doing this now, and I'll be having a different experience to you, say, or someone whoever's watching it at home is having a different experience. And it's not
yeah,
none of them are wrong or right. And like you said, like people can be brought up in exactly the same family and have a completely different experience. Even with my own son, like the stories of him growing up, it's like that facilitating that space for him to be able to come to me and tell me about his experience of me as a parent. It's to be uncomfortable, but
yeah,
allow that space is very important, not to invalidate his experience, because then in that story is healing for both of us,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know?
I've had a few of those uncomfortable chats with my
Yeah,
children as
they're
well. Um,
uncomfortable conversations to have with our children, but they're very important as part of the story to allow them to have their own healing. And it can be uncomfortable as a parent to hear something that your child says to you. And you think, oh, actually, yeah, I was like that. There may well be good
yeah,
reason behind it, but I was that way, and it's true. And to validate it for them.
yeah. And I think that's what we sometimes forget is to validate, ourselves and our own experiences. And
Yeah.
we kind of sit and wallow in them
Oh God, I
without,
love it. I say to my friends, like, sometimes it's got a lot better since I've been around the three principles, which has been like 8, 7, 8 years. But oh, I loved a pity party. I would love it. I'd say, oh, life is terrible. No one understands why my life's so awful. I haven't had a pet. Oh. And now, like, I'll have a little pity party, but it won't last long. But
yeah,
before, I'd switch off the phone. I wouldn't talk to anyone. I'd let it wallow for 2 or 3 days.
yeah,
But now I'm like, oh, is that useful? Do I really want to waste my precious life wallowing in self pity?
yeah.
I'm not getting any younger. I'm not going to be doing that. So I allow myself the pity party for a little while, but not for so long anymore.
Yeah,
You know.
no, I think we do need to allow because we
Yeah.
need to allow
Yeah.
those feelings out,
Yeah. Of
don't we?
course. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how far along the path,
Yeah.
along we are along the path, things will still crop up and things will still trigger things from the past. And
Of
yes,
course.
you're allowed to wallow, you're allowed to have that pity party, but it's sitting in it
Yeah.
that kind of keeps you stuck and keeps you from moving on. I mean,
That
I'm
is
thinking back to
really,
when you said like you were let out of the care system at 16 and you just had this great big world in front of you. I think a lot of people would have been completely thrown by that and wouldn't have known what to do with themselves. So it really,
I mean, when I look back now, I think, wow, I was pretty savvy because I thought, well, how am I going to do? So I got a job in a hotel because then I knew I would have accommodation and money.
well, yeah,
When I look back now, I think, oh, actually, I was pretty savvy. That was a pretty clever thing to do, really, at
mm,
that age. And then I just kind of, yeah, I always wanted to kind of like have this idea I was going to be like this businesswoman, which was hilarious. So I didn't even have any concept of that. And then, but I've changed as a person because I was very private about my story when I was younger. I didn't want anyone to really know because
yeah,
we went to school in a big green bus, so we were the kids from the care system. There was no way to hide. So I spent a long time avoiding talking about my story. And if there was a situation that came up where I might be confronted, when you start to do healing work and you go to groups and they ask you things.
yeah,
So I would find those things very, very uncomfortable. I would like get physical reaction like palpitations, sweaty palms, and it was because I hadn't done my own healing work. And then I went through a stage of like I would say too much, and then I would have a resonance of feeling unwell afterwards because I hadn't done my work. Whereas now, I'm not attached to the things that happened. I can talk about them if I need to, but I don't really need to because I don't feel the benefit so much in going back and telling people horror stories. I don't.
yeah,
That's the story. I don't see the
yeah.
benefit of that really.
I think it's a process, isn't it? We have to own our
Yeah.
story. We have to own our story first of all and
Yeah.
acknowledge it
Yeah.
and know that it's part of what formed us.
Yeah.
Well, then
Yeah.
we can let go the angst and the grief and the sadness around that story, and we can see it as empowering,
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely.
And we
I
can
think that.
see how it can help others.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we're in that space of pushing it down, we're going to get ill. We get, your body hold, like there's a book, the body holds a score. I think it's that something like that. But it talks about that. Are we if we're holding on to the things, then we're not able to move through them and let them go. And I feel very strongly about I love, my favorite thing to read is autobiography. So I love stories. I like
Mm.
listening what's going on for people, and movies that are about people's stories. And I feel like you said, it's important to own your story, because on some level, if you don't, you're still dragging it along with you, because you haven't done the work to put it down and let it go. It's still
Yeah,
sitting there. So you're seeing life through that lens a lot of the time. So when you're able to just, yeah, just, and also this is the big thing that I learned when I was doing my practitioner training with Ian Watson, was how could I be authentically saying to young people in care, you can have a fabulous life, you can do whatever the hell you want, and you don't have to be a victim of your difficult beginning, if I was still holding on to it. It was a massive insight for me. Oh, okay.
yeah,
There's a lack of inauthenticity there. I wasn't expecting people to, but on a resonance, I could be expecting people to do something that I hadn't actually done yet.
yeah,
So it was inauthentic on some level. So that was a huge thing for me when I was sharing that. And I'm happy to share with people. I think there's a value in sharing that story and having a connection. And when I was a teacher, I was teaching, and I shared with the young people in my class one day, oh, I'm a teacher, but I grew up in care and la la la. And after the lesson, one of the girls said, "Can I talk to you, miss?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." And she said, "Oh," I never thought I could be a teacher. She said, "I'm in foster care," and so
mm,
see the power of that, the power of
yeah.
just sharing a little thing, and she might not be
Oops, you're frozen again.
showed up. Hold on. Oh,
Yeah.
what was that to do with?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
there's
on
so much
internet.
power in their stories, which is why I started this podcast so that, we
Yeah,
could
it's
share
wonderful.
people's
Yeah,
stories and they could either see themselves in that story or get
yeah,
something from somebody's story that might,
yeah,
help
definitely.
them turn their life around. And I think we have gone over my allotted time for this. So,
Oh,
I mean, it's
okay.
just been absolutely fascinating to talk to you,
Oh,
Chris.
okay, darling. I've loved
Um,
it.
I will be putting your details in somewhere on the podcast so people can connect with you. So, are you happy for people to connect with you?
Yes, of course. Yeah, like if they'd love to come and share in the Moroccan retreat, and also, yeah, I run poetry workshops, which we talk about that. So can I just let's share a little bit about that, because that's connected with stories. We talk
Yeah.
about I teach people to write poems, but based upon someone they admire, and they're the story around why they admire that person. And
Okay,
then
cool.
I won't give it away, but there's a powerful, powerful twist in that. It's beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds lovely. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean, obviously, as I've said, and I've said this on all the podcasts so far, I am creating a community around the podcast as well.
no,
So,
wonderful.
hopefully, you will join the community and people
Yes,
can connect with
definitely.
you in there.
Love
Um,
to. Thank you for giving me the
thank,
opportunity to
yeah,
be here, darling. I really loved it.
and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, darling.
I'll see
Thank
you
you.
again soon.
All right, babe.